city with strategic importance. People from every continent
Does it sound really loud?
presence in the city.
It sounds really loud out there.
Without Christ. Its population is got about nearly 6.5 times the population of Sandusky, but it's about 4 times the size.
We will be joining our teammates Chris and Tori at the center there in our city.
Sorry.
Echo.
Where that noise is coming from?
We will be joining Chris and Tori at a community center that reaches out to North African refugees and immigrants that have come across from North Africa and have settled into southern Spain. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, let's go to the next one too. Yeah, there they are. That's Chris and just to give you a little background information, Chris and Tori are good friends of Bethany's. She met them several years ago in Panama, and then Manu and Noemi are actually from our Madrid works, and they're now working in Malaga with us. So the immigrants and refugees that are being served at the center, at the DS42 Center, are predominantly Muslim and are fleeing from wars, poverty, bad health care, bad education, droughts, many other terrible circumstances, looking for a better life for their families. God's wonderful, and He's providential. And in His providence, He's used horrible things, awful things, to push them right out of the clutches, right out of a place where we couldn't reach them with the gospel, and right into the arms of Christians, where we can share the gospel freely with them in the country of Spain. So God's just a wonderful God.
You can go to the next slide. So this is the name of the center that we will be going to. It comes from the passage of scripture in Matthew 10:42 that talks about giving cold cups of water in the name of the disciple. And then you can go to the next one. So at our food center that we have, our main thing that we do is a food distribution. By the time they get to us, they're feeling very hopeless. They don't speak the language. They are unable to get employment because they don't speak Spanish. And they are just in a really hopeless, desperate situation. They're not able to find food to feed their families. And so a way that we are able to meet this real physical need is through our food distribution. So right now we're serving about 700 people every 2 weeks. They come in and we give them an allotment of food, and they're able to then feed their families. And then some other things that we do are Spanish classes. And here are some of our places in the center where we will do this. We do Spanish so that they can learn the language and they can assimilate to their new culture. We also teach English classes because our city is a very it's a big tourist area, and so having English capabilities really helps them in being able to live there and to hopefully find employment. And then the other thing that we also do homework help for kids. And then what I'm really excited about is helping with a sewing co-op. So we bring a group of ladies together, and we teach them how to sew or make jewelry, different crafting projects. And then we're able to take those items and sell them on a free trade site online, and then some places here in the States. And then they can use that money to support their families. But we do all of these things to be able to make connections so that we can hopefully one day be able to share the bread of life with them.
So the biggest reason that we're going is this statistic right here. As we mentioned, they're predominantly Muslim, and out of 1,000 Moroccans in Spain, only one would claim to be a Christian. That's 1 out of 1,000. For comparison, 775 Americans out of 1,000 claim to be Christians. So that's quite a difference. Spiritual need is so great. And we're very thankful for the opportunities God's allowing us to have to share through the center already. In the nearly 2 years that the center has been open, we have been able to share the story of Jesus through English camp. English camp last year, they had kids from all over, predominantly Muslim, coming in, and they were able to share the gospel through a VBS curriculum that we could use for English camp, because the songs are in English, the lessons are in English, the games are in English, so it helps them learn English, but also shares the gospel with them. We also last year had a Christmas party was attended by 70 Muslim women and their children. And let's pause there for a second. Christmas party. Right? Christ is in the name. This is some amazing stuff. But they came because they have a relationship with the people that are working at the center right now that we're going to be joining. And they came not because it was a Christmas party, because they don't care anything about Christmas. They came because they were invited by friends, and so they came to the center for a Christmas party. And one of the volunteers from one of the local churches who speaks Arabic came in and shared the story of of Jesus from the incarnation through the resurrection in Arabic, and they heard the gospel for the very first time. So these are just some of the opportunities. We also got word right before COVID hit that there was a man who was at the center. He was standing in line, and that's pre-COVID obviously, but he was signing paperwork. They have to sign quite a bit of paperwork every week. It's like getting a mortgage every week to get the food, just an accounting of where it all goes. And he was actually speaking with them and got on the topic of Isa. Isa is the distortion of Jesus in the Quran. And they began to talk about Isa, and he said, I want to know more. And so he invited our volunteer to coffee. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, I wish lost people were coming up to me saying, hey, can we talk more about Jesus over coffee? And so this is some of the most wonderful things. And then even more recently, we have a man who's been volunteering at the center. He's come and gotten food, and he feels like he needs to give back. He's from Eastern Europe. He feels like he was raised that he was supposed to give back if he takes. And so he comes and works at the center, but he also takes some. And just recently, he started a Discovery Bible study where they're going through the Word of God 6 to 7 times within an hour and asking about the same 5 questions every week. And this is an unbeliever coming in and having a Bible study every week. We could get all the Christians in America to come for a Bible study every week. God has been so gracious. He's allowing us to share the gospel with so many people. He's opening so many doors for transformation in the good news.
So we want to be a place where the Christian gospel and Christian generosity collide. We want to be a place where they can see that we love them, but we love them because Jesus loves them. It's going to take much time and prayer and effort because the type of ministry that we're going into is very difficult and it takes a very, very long time. So we know that it's going to take a long time, and we really desire your prayers as we're going to Spain to pray for us as we are going, because we can't do it without those prayers. And then this room right here, I want you to remember that this is the tea room at the center, and the culture of the people that we're working with, tea is very, very important to them, and just about every Moroccan home has a tea room in it. And so we have one that we've set up at the center, and this is where conversation happens. This is where we have the opportunity to build relationships with people, and we can talk to them about life. And we want you to pray for this room. We want you to pray that we have many opportunities to share the good news here. And we want to have lots and lots of coffee and tea and just lots of good conversation. So please, if you don't remember anything else we talk about tonight, I want you to remember this room and to pray for this room.
Yes, for sure. And then if you'll go to the last slide here, our last 2 slides. So biggest thing is we need monthly support. That is our biggest need. But I want you to consider partnering with us on a monthly basis. And there's 2 amounts that we put out there, and I'll give you the reason. We normally share this in our longer form presentation, but this ministry was put on our heart, and we'll probably talk about it later, over a cup of coffee. And then there's so many times where a cup of coffee just seems to keep coming up, where we have people who are invited to talk about Jesus over coffee, or whether it's coffee or tea in the tea room. And so what we're asking people is to consider giving up a cup of coffee a week or a cup of coffee a day to support the ministry on a monthly basis. A cup of coffee a day looks like about $82, especially if you go to like Starbucks or somewhere like that. But $82 a month, or a coffee a week would be more like $12 or $13 a month. And so that's what we're asking people to do, is to consider supporting us in that way. Now, if you look on the screen, you have a QR code. You'll have to use a different device than what you're watching on. But if you want to commit to give to us, this is how you would do that. You could point your other device at this QR code, and it should, when you have the camera pulled up, it should bring up the website to sign up for our Facebook page, for our newsletter, and for to give to us on a regular basis. We really are praying for people to come alongside us and partner. That's why we don't just say, "Hey, we want for you to give every month." We want you to also sign up to follow what we're doing, so that you can get updates, so that you can share in it with us, so that you can pray over the tea room and over who we've been talking to in that tea room. Well, thank you so much. I think we're gonna. What's the next thing? Oh yes. Yes. Let me pull up the words so I don't forget them. You don't ever forget words, do you? All right, I'll sing for us. My worth is not in what I own, not in the strength of flesh and bone, but in the costly wounds of love at the cross. My worth is not in skill or name, in win or lose, in pride or shame, but in the blood of Christ that flowed at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone. As summer flowers we fade and die, fame, youth, and beauty hurry by, but life eternal calls to us at the cross. I will not boast in wealth or might, or human wisdom's fleeting light, but I will boast in knowing Christ at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone. Two wonders here that I confess, my worth and my unworthiness, my value fixed, my ransom paid at the cross. And I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. I will trust in him, no other. My soul is satisfied in him alone. My soul is satisfied in him alone.
Us online, and if you are from our church, or if you're not from our church, we appreciate you being with us tonight. Appreciate everyone coming out with us tonight. The way this is going to work, we've already seen a preview of their ministry that Josh Bethany have. We've got to spend a day with them and learn a lot already. We're hoping that through this interview we can kind of dig into the details, get to know them a little bit better, get to understand their ministry. I will say this before we get started. They have a very unique ministry. We met them back at a banquet back in March and begin to talk to them, and it's not your typical missionaries the way we think about it. Typically you think about a missionary going to a foreign country, trying to reach out and see souls saved, start a new church, and they have a little different angle that they're going at this with. So very interested tonight to dig into the details, and so it'll be a lot more enjoyable, just like with Scripture Sit Down. It'll be a lot more enjoyable if those of you at home, as well as all of you that are here, will ask questions. I hope there'll be a lot of questions. This is all we're going to do tonight, is just try to get to know these guys and their ministry. So just encourage you to put your questions in the comments if you're online. Those of you here, please ask questions, and thing about a question is if you're thinking about it, somebody else is probably thinking about it as well. So it'd be a benefit to all of us. So we'll get right into it. And I'm just going to ask these guys questions, and either one of you can answer it, or both of you can answer it. How's that? So first off, just get this thing going. Tell us a little bit about your background, maybe some of your family, your how you guys got together, just a little bit about history of you two. So give us a little rundown of you guys.
So Josh originally grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He lived there up until right before we got married. And then I am from a little bit of everywhere. My family moved a lot, and I grew up in Tennessee, Michigan, and actually my dad's family is from here in Ohio. So I have a lot of connections here as well. We met in 2012. He was traveling with a singing group from the college he was attending, and they came to my church, and then we fell in love through Facebook. Then it was kind of history from there, but we got married a year later in 2013, and then we lived just south of Nashville from the time we got married until this past February. We moved on February 1st and back to his parents as we're fundraising and things. We've moved back home, but we lived there. He pastored, was a youth pastor for 2.5 years, and then a pastor for 4 years. Right? That's correct. Yeah. And so we were involved in ministry there, and working jobs, and just kind of living life. And then we had this ministry that was presented to us, and it changed our lives forever.
Anyone have any questions on any of that? Stop us if you have any here online. All right. So Bethany's already alluded to the fact that you pastored some, Josh. So tell us a little bit about your ministry life before you became a missionary. What was your ministry like then? Give us a little bit of detail, maybe.
Well, I started off just as a young preacher, preaching to kids. So I went to a Christian school, and they believed in developing Christian leaders for the future. And one of the biggest opportunities for us is they actually opened up the chapels, and they let us preach and teach the first, second, third graders, fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. And they would help us work through that. And if we were struggling with something, or if we didn't do a good job at it, they would let us know. And they were honest, sometimes brutally honest. And so that was kind of the beginning of my ministry. I knew God was calling me into ministry. And then, of course, lots of volunteer ministries as a teenager and as a young college student. One of the biggest ones was my family was involved in the bus ministry for years. We grew bus routes. We were bringing kids into the church every week, spending time in their neighborhood. Me and my brother were young. When we were young, we'd go play basketball with the kids, developing relationships with them, and we saw many people saved through that. And then my pastoral ministry began. I started filling in the church on the Carolina-Virginia line. So it was called CAVA. It was really interesting. The church had actually been on the Carolina side at one point. They didn't like something down there, so in the early 1900s, they put the church building on a carts and hauled it a mile down the road with horses and moved the church with the horses and carts. And so they always used to talk about that. I'm like, none of y'all were there, so how do you even know that's a true story? But I'm they said that some people who were there told them. So just it was a very different, because I grew up in a big church, and then I'm going to this little church that is small enough to be carried with carts and horses. And God was shaping my heart to realize that ministry was more about individuals than about the masses. And that was a big lesson I needed to learn. So going to a church with a couple hundred people down to preaching and teaching in a church with 10 was a big thing. And then got the opportunity when moved to Tennessee for college, transferred colleges. A Cumberland Presbyterian church called the school looking for some help, and I went, and we joined there and met some wonderful saints, some wonderful people that that we needed them and they needed us. And God so often does that. And then because we were there, another church in the next community over was a Southern Baptist church, and they were looking for a pastor a couple years later. And I filled the pulpit a couple times, and God moved on our hearts to go there, and that was a blessing. And some of our best friends are there too. So God has really moved us, and in each step of the way, each part of that ministry, I could just go into so many details about how it was moving in our hearts to change maybe the way we viewed ministry, the way we lived, not in a holiness or unholiness way, but the way we viewed evangelism and mission. Each one has a part in that. And it's pretty incredible because each one has prepared us for the ministry that we're going into. Anything to add to that? Okay.
So it sounds like you've had some experiences and some God's been kind of shaping you for where you're headed now from your experiences and the things you've learned. And you have a comment or?
Got a question online. Josh, what college did you go to?
Went to Welch College. I also went to Gateway. I went to Gateway and then transferred to Welch. So.
And Bethany, you as well went to Welch as well?
I attended Welch. I was home for a year in between my freshman and sophomore year at Welch, and I came home, went to community college for a year, and then I went back to Welch. But I graduated from there in 2013. Yes, 2013.
Any questions here?
So, have you actually been to Spain yet? Have you?
No.
Okay. Are you nervous?
We sold our house, we sold all of our vehicles and most of our belongings. So yes, we're very nervous.
We've had the opportunity to spend a day with Josh and Bethany, and it has been a blessing. A young couple, in my eyes, they're young anyway. And as Josh has already said, they've walked away from material things, their house, their jobs, everything they have here, really abandoning everything to answer the call that the Lord's laid on their heart. And I commend them for that. I think for young people to do that is extraordinary. And so, we're all caught up. Next question then. So explain to us how you knew God wanted you to be missionaries and why. Maybe start back, Bethany. We talked today a little bit about you kind of knew before you ever got married this was going to happen, and kind of run us through the process of how you knew it was Spain and how you knew God wanted to be missionaries.
Yeah, so God really put it on my heart when I was 12 years old. I was at church camp, and the whole theme of the week was saying yes. And at that point, I was 12. I really didn't know what was going to happen in the future, but I was like, I'm going to be a doctor, and that's what I was going to do. And by the end of that week, God had really changed my heart and put missions on my heart, and I knew that's what I was going to do. So that is why I enrolled at Welch. I did not apply to any other school. I just knew that God was leading me into missions, and so as part of my degree, I had to do what was called an overseas apprenticeship. So I spent a whole summer in the country of Panama. And while I was there, our teammates, Chris and Tori, brought an E-Team, which is a group of high school students down and on a mission trip. And while I was there, Tori and I just became friends very quickly. We had a lot in common, and the Lord just started knitting our lives together even back then. And so they came home, and I kind of followed their ministry. They ended up going to Spain and are working in the ministry that we were going to, and just kind of kept up with them. But then I came back home, and I met Josh a year later, and before we even started dating, I said to him, I was like, the Lord has called me into this, and I need to know if you're on board, because if not, this is not going anywhere, because this is what I'm doing, and this is what God has called us to. And even through that conversation that we had, I remember distinctly where I was when we had that conversation. It was over the phone. And even then, during that conversation, we started talking about two specific places that God was kind of putting on our hearts even then, and that was France and Spain. And so we began praying about it even before we were married. We knew that that was an eventual goal. But then, as he talked about, we got jobs, he graduated college, we settled in, and he was in ministry, and we were living the American dream. We were, just happy and comfortable. And then in 2018, I ran into Chris and Tori at the National Convention in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was a very quick conversation. And they were like, hey, how are you doing? Is this, and it got to, is mission still something you want to do? And I said, yes, the timing just hasn't been right. We had applied once before, but, God had shut that door back in 2014. And so we knew that, it was something we were going to do eventually. And she said, well, we're coming to Nashville, where we lived, and we'd love to sit down and have coffee. And so we had a life-changing cup of coffee in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And we sat there, and 3 hours later, after they were telling us about all the needs and the people that they were working with, God put a love for these people in our heart that we've never met. We're going in complete faith to the people that we're going to be working with. But God has been pushing us in that direction this whole time. And we knew when we left that coffee shop that this was where God was leading. We didn't know how or when, but we knew that's what it was. So then we were praying for a whole year about the timing. We knew that's where we were headed, but we were just praying about when the time would be right. And then we were able to, God just worked it out for us to be able to go before the mission board in December, and we were approved. And now here we are.
Anyone have any questions on that? All right, got some online questions.
Yeah, we have an online question asking how your ministry is connected to the Free Will Baptist Church.
So the Hannah Project is a division underneath Free Will Baptist International Missions. And so we do a lot of the humanitarian work. And really, it's so that we can share the gospel. We go to help people in their felt needs, build relationships, and share the gospel. One of the ways that we describe it is bringing help, hope, and healing to the places that we're going. And there's no greater hope, of course. There's no greater healing. There's no, greater help than to know Christ. So,
How did your families accept? How did your families accept your call, or did your parents already know? Like when you said you were 12 years old, how did your families accept it?
my family was okay. And of course, we live so far away from them. We only see them once a year, and now we live with them. So they're probably fed up with us now. I would be fed up with me, but you can answer on your family.
So, I was telling my parents from a young age that was what I was going to do. And my mom is probably our biggest cheerleader and our biggest supporter. She, every time we have a service, she calls us immediately and asks us how it went. And she's, the first one we call when we need prayer. She is behind us 100%. My dad, on the other hand, he's struggled with it, and he is still struggling with it. So pray for my dad. He's having a hard time with that. I don't think quite understands why we're going or what, he's like, you can do that here. He's struggling with it, but man, my mom is definitely our biggest cheerleader.
Any other questions? All right, welcome your questions online or in person. Make it more interesting for all of us. So Josh, we've already alluded to the fact that you're not quite the typical missionaries. You're not just typically we think of a missionary again going and trying to just convert souls and build a church and get a nationals to take over. And you guys have a little different a model that you're following. So explain to us a little bit what your ministry will look like when you get to Spain. What's that going to look like?
Well, the very first thing it's going to look like is carrying heavy boxes, because we'll know enough Spanish to get into trouble, but not out of trouble. So yeah, carrying heavy boxes, and so they made it nice and fancy, called it logistics, and made me feel better about it. But yeah, that's what we're going to start off with, and we're going to go to language school. So those are the two big things: is get acclimated, get to where we can be a better help. And the great thing is because it is a type of ministry that involves uh, distributing food. You don't have to know Spanish to move boxes. You don't have to do it to help load people's cars or to show them, hey, I care about, or or load their carts, and to show them, hey, I care about you. Um, but as far as on an ongoing basis, um, big part of our ministry is going to be uh, Bethany's going to be working with the paperwork. I'm going to be doing some work with the sports program that is coming up. I don't know if we even talked about that today. Well, we have a sports program that's going to be coming up soon. Manu is heading it up right now, but it's going to be for the kids. And we're hoping that that'll be a way we can build relationships. But all of these different avenues are ways for us to be a part of their lives so that we can share the gospel with them. It's really hard to share the gospel with somebody you don't have a relationship with, especially from a context where the very first thing whispered in their ears when they're born is that Allah is one God, Muhammad's his prophet, and he has no son. And I mean, that's whispered in their ears the first day they're born, and they say stuff like, along those lines every day. They disciple their people very well, and it's ingrained in their very being. Islam is. And so it takes more than just a 30-minute encounter for most of them to see the error of their ways and come to Christ. It takes some time to break down those bridges and to share the gospel, share the gospel, share the gospel, share the gospel over and over again. And so that's what we want to do. We want to build those relationships so we can do that. So we can we can spend time with them, and when somebody has a need, pray over them. And let them know who we're praying to. We're not going to be shy about that either. It's not like we're incognito about it. We're not, pretending to be generic. We're honest. Hey, we're Christians. This is why we do it. We do this in the name of Christ, and we're praying that someday we'll see converts. The other thing is you can't have a church till you have Christians. If you have a church building and no Christians, you have a building. You don't have a church. And so we got to have Christians before we can be church planners.
And I mentioned this at lunch today, but in Islam, you have to really earn a seat at the table to be able to have conversations with them. And so we have found this way that we can serve them and meet very real physical needs because they are very hungry. We had a lady who came into the center who had a child that was about the same age as our children, and she was not sure what she was going to feed her child that night. And so she stood there and wept, and we could see that she was malnourished, but her child wasn't. So she was making the choice to feed her child and not eat herself. And so she came in for her appointment, and she was a little late, so we didn't have anything for her baby. And so, she was weeping, and our workers were able to take her across the street and to buy food for her and the baby that week. But, we were able to share with them that we loved them. And that is one way that we are looking to earn that seat. We want to build relationships so that they can trust us, because we can't, if we just go up to them and we start talking about Jesus, they're going to turn us off completely. And so we have found a way, there's a saying that you can't show someone, or you can't tell someone how much you care until you show them how much you care. And so we really are seeking to meet those physical needs and meet the very real physical needs so that we can earn a seat at the table and be able to share with them the good news. That is our ultimate goal. That's why we are going, but we are able to show them love and compassion through that, just like Jesus did. And that is our goal, is to be able to earn that seat at the table of their hearts.
So I want to make sure everybody understands what you guys are doing the best we can. So obviously, as missionaries, really I guess we'd say that your top goal is to see souls saved, see people not go to hell. But the people you're trying to reach are not necessarily open to that. So you're going to fulfill a physical need, and build relationships in hopes that that will open doors to a group that would probably be completely closed to the gospel, in hopes that they may turn to the Lord. So that's a very unique difference in what many missionaries are doing.
Yeah, I'll add to that that most people around the world takes 8 to 10. And this is from 50 years ago. This is a booklet I read just this week. Takes 8 to 10 hours of Bible study before they come to Christ, and that is most people around the world. Muslims are even harder, because just to get them to do that would be hard. But you've got to break down every day what their parents do for within the prayers they say. They read the Quran. They read the Quran during Ramadan every year, sometimes twice during Ramadan every year. I mean, they know what they believe, and they not just they know what they feel what they believe, and it's everything about them. Not sometimes we've got a cultural feeling. We can kind of separate our spiritual life sometimes from our secular life, which isn't necessarily a good thing either. But they don't do that. So I mean, when you say you need to become a Christian, it means you need to also not have any status in your community. You need to make sure that your parents never can sell their sheep back home, because they're going to be rejected too, even though they have nothing to do with it. They're going to lose their place in the mosque. They have a kind of a status, a caste type of thing that you grow in, but they're going to be knocked down a peg just because their kid is a Christian now, and they lose everything. And not just them, everybody they love loses everything.
So you're not only trying to convince them to accept a religion that they've been taught all their lives is wrong, but you're also asking them to walk away from everything that they have known, family-wise and community-wise and everything else.
Father, like Jesus said.
So it's a pretty big task that you're attempting. So we have questions or.
How has the ministry changed this year because of COVID and obviously everything that's going on?
So before COVID, we opened the center every week, and we were having something at the center pretty much every day, whether it was homework help or the sewing co-op classes. Something was happening every day pretty much. We had to be shut down for about 3 months. 2.5, 3 months. We were completely shut down. Everyone in Spain, across the entire country, you couldn't leave your house except to go to the grocery store, and you had to have like a permission slip to get out of your house. It was COVID was way worse there. You could go out 5 minutes a day to take your pets out. That was all they were allowed out for months and months and months. And so we had to be completely shut down. We were able to get clearance from the government to open back up, but we can only open up every 2 weeks now instead of every week. And we can only open 2 days a week. But that way we can follow if someone were to get COVID, it's the 2-week waiting period. So we have that built in. And before they would come and stand in line, and they would go through and get items and things off the tables. Well, now we have to prepackage everything. They come up and we hand it to them. So there's not as much interaction, and we haven't been able to start classes back yet because of COVID. We're hoping that we're going to be able to start them back soon, but unfortunately Spain is getting hit with a second wave of COVID right now. The numbers of people dying are going back up right now, and so they are putting more restrictions in. So it's very possible that we will have to close down again for a portion of time, but we're praying that we'll be able to stay open. It is. It has been very difficult, and we've actually lost contact with about 40 of our families or individuals, and so we're very concerned about them. We don't know if something happened to them, but when we're not open, they're not eating because they have a very hard time making money, and so they're unable to really feed them. So that's why we were able to get special clearance from the government to open because they were in such a desperate place. We have been able to kind of come up with some emergency packs of just like rice and shelf stable things that we can give out to. But because of COVID too, our numbers are going way up. We have over 200 families that are on a waiting list right now because there are just so many people who need help. They say we could duplicate the center 5 times over and still not be able to feed everybody. But we're praying that the Lord is going to open up more opportunities through this. But because of COVID, it also gives us an opportunity to share hope with people because they are feeling even more hopeless now. They're sitting in their homes and thinking about things, and so it's also giving us more opportunities. I think people are really seeking to find answers as to why this is happening, why their loved ones are gone, and so we are looking at the good things that are coming out of it too.
Online question?
I have a question online. Where do you get the food that you hand out?
So the food comes mainly from the European Union. They give us an allotment. It's a lot of food that we get. Once a month they bring in the food, and then there are also some local farmers in the area that donate fresh fruits and vegetables, and even we get a few things that's funneled through there's a local food bank too, and so they will send some food to us that way too.
Other questions?
Yeah.
The more the better.
We love questions.
Few actually. So as far as the immigration into the country, do they have to pass customs and stuff, or are these refugees that are literally just coming across the water and flooding? Because you were talking about them being in their homes, and I'm thinking okay, are there refugee camps? Where are these people at? And I mean, you may not know, but
Yes. So people are coming across it by the thousands into Europe. In 2018, it was a crisis that they were really trying to figure out. I think the numbers have slowed down a little bit right now, especially because borders are all closed. But they will come across some of them. It's only 7 miles between the tip of North Africa and the tip of Spain, and so some of them are coming across on styrofoam that are just trying to float across. There are people that are making makeshift boats and coming swimming. You name it, they're doing. There are quite a few. There are people who come through on visas and then they don't leave, or they will just come in any way that they can. But then the laws in Spain are kind of vague and very different in that if you go into a place and you say, "This is mine," they can't really evict you. And so they are going into unfinished apartments and putting a bed down and saying, "This is mine." And then the people that own the buildings can't evict them, or they will rent a couch in someone's house. They will pretty much try to find anywhere they can to live. You might have 20 people in a 2-bedroom apartment where they are just trying to find somewhere to stay. And the people there, they don't mind that they're coming across necessarily and staying in the country, but they don't want to do anything to help them. So they welcome us to come in, the Spanish government, and to help take care of them because they don't want to have that responsibility. But they, I just lost my train of thought. There was something else I was going to say. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have another question too.
Yeah.
So as far as the number of people that you can reach with the ministry center, is that completely dependent upon gaining more money for support and getting more food, or is that based on what the center can hold capacity wise?
So we can get more food. That's not our problem. The problem is finding more space. It's very hard to find a big place to rent in Spain, and also the rent is extremely expensive. And so we haven't been able to find a bigger space yet. And we also are looking in a specific location. The center is located in an amazing spot between where most of them live and the local mosque that's there. So it's in a great position to be able to really reach into that community. And so we don't really want to leave that community either. So, we're just trying to pray about that and see if it's better to try to start a second center or to try to find a bigger space.
Other questions?
Because they are refugees, they're obviously fleeing from something. What are the countries that they are predominantly running from, and are they more lenient or more susceptible to listening to your presentation of the gospel because they're fleeing persecution or something like that?
Yes. So the countries that most of the people come from are Morocco and Algeria. But then we also have some sub-Saharan Africans, Eastern Europeans. There's a lot of them there too. There's a big group of Chinese, and Venezuelans, and they come. We have over 10 different languages that are spoken at the center. So there's a lot of different people that are represented. But they are fleeing from a lot of war and bad health care and lots of different things. And so they're running from the people that, other Muslims that are persecuting them and running right into the arms of Christians. So we're able to show them something different. And so then they ask, well, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And that gives us more of a way to share with them. So far we have not seen anyone that's come to Christ, but we've had opportunities to share, and we have seen the Lord softening hearts. And so we're really praying that over the next few years we'll see more of them come to Christ.
Good questions, guys. Anyone else?
I have another question. As far as the classes that are offered at the center, that's not just for the people who are signed up on the waiting list. Like, anyone can come to those?
They can sign up. And actually, we did have a technology class that was just going on, and we had somebody from the outside come and help with that, and they were able to do that. Obviously, they could do that remotely. So that just wrapped up a couple weeks ago. Once again, they went from being shepherds to living in a city. There's not much use for shepherds in the middle of a city. And we're talking about a city like this is densely populated. Very densely populated, and I mean everybody lives in apartments. There's no houses out there, and like I said, there's nothing for somebody who's grown up their whole life on the countryside. So technology class is a wonderful thing because it teaches them a skill that they're going to need in a city.
I have another question.
Yes.
Do you also do, like you talked about the Eteams traveling? Do you have teams come there, or is it more dangerous? Like, how does that work?
So the city we're in is a pretty safe place. So we do have, through the Hannah Project, they do like 2-3 week trips. We actually have one. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that we have one that's coming in March. It could change because of COVID and all those other things. But right now we have one that's tentatively planned for March. And they have lots of other groups that will come down and do different trips and can help with the distribution and different things like that. So where we are is pretty safe. We have to be careful because of the people we're working with. If they have family that's still in the countries they come from, it can really hurt them. But where we are, we're pretty safe.
Other questions? So Josh, I was fascinated by this today. I think it's a testimony to the power of the gospel, but I think most of us know that Muslims are very dedicated to their faith. They believe very strongly in what they believe, and will sacrifice greatly for what they believe in. But share with us, you shared with me already today, but tell us about sometimes when you finally break through and a Muslim will convert to Christianity, and then they want to return home with the good news. Tell us a little bit about that, how that the testimony to the gospel.
Yeah, and actually, let me start off even broader. If you go back to 700 through, I think it's 1800, and that's about the time Islam started, and it's just an arbitrary number, but there were only 2 voluntary movements to Christ from Muslims. And a voluntary movement would be 100 baptisms. So that's 100 people making public professions of faith in Christ. The key word is voluntary. There were many others that happened, but it was at the end of a sword. So in the last between the 1800s and 2000, there were 13. Since 2000, there are over 70 movements of Muslims to Christ. So God's doing something big in Islamic countries. And there's a good book on it called A Wind in the House of Islam. I would recommend everybody read it. It's got a lot of information. It shows the spectrum of what those believers look like and where they're coming from. One of the rooms in the House of Islam that was pretty bare, they didn't share much about it, was North Africa, because there's just not as much gospel witness there. Believe it or not, Afghanistan and those places had more conversion stories to share than even North Africa, because it's just so closed off. We've even had Free Will Baptists who've tried to establish churches there have been run out. And so it's not something you can do, especially as an outsider. But when someone gets saved, they can go back into their home country. They don't have to get a visa. They're returning home, and they can start sharing the gospel, and they can start a church. And so, we would love to see someone come to Christ, be trained by. Myself and Chris, we're both former pastors, and so we could train them to be pastors, and then go back in and build a church. Maybe go take their family back and build a church. And we've seen, not just us, but the other groups have seen that happen in other places. And that's what we're praying to see, is to see not just if you read a lot of missionary stories, you'll notice that the majority of people who come to Christ are not because a missionary led them specifically, because a missionary led one who led a dozen.
Exactly. So once the Holy Spirit reveals to them the truth about Christianity, they're very dedicated people then to Christianity, the way they were to being a Muslim. So they're very on fire and very dedicated and very all in. And
I'll tell you another book that everybody should read if they're interested in this topic is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. As Brother Nabil Qureshi, have you read it?
No, I don't think so.
Are you familiar with RZIM Ministries?
I don't think so.
That's Brother Ravi Zacharias.
Oh yeah.
He Brother Nabil worked for Ravi in his ministry, and Brother Nabil was from a devout Muslim family. His dad was stationed in Norfolk, was a part of the Navy, and he went to ODU and met a Christian there. And over the course of 3 years, everything he believed in was shattered by this Christian who actually took time to debate him, to love him, to tell him he was wrong, but love him anyways. He just keep working on him, and finally he came to Christ. It's an amazing story. And then, but his ministry after that, he was dedicated. He was a medical doctor. He had a doctorate to be a doctor, and he spent the rest of his life, instead of making lots of money helping people with their physical needs, he spent the rest of his life explaining to other Muslims, or that Jesus is the one true way to the Father, and teaching Christians how to do it too.
Fascinating stuff. So any other online
I have a question online. Do you pass out any Christian literature to the Muslims?
So yes, we do. We have some things that we don't necessarily will give them to them, but we have them out at the center, and they're welcome to take them. And we should put that picture in our slideshow, but we actually have a picture of the table that's there by the door that has the different things, and they're translated into Arabic so that they can take those with them.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that. One of the biggest things is, we can give them the Injil, which is the New Testament, but that's what the Quran refers to, and actually puts it in a higher place than other books. And that's something, just one little thing. You have a Arabic New Testament with the word Injil on the front. Injil is just another word for evangel. It comes from the same root as evangelism, evangel. So the Injil. So there you go. And that's one thing. I mean, that's something that their religion actually puts at a premium, and we can have it sitting right there, and most of them are more than happy to read it and hear what we have to say.
Fascinating stuff. So we no other questions. All right. So Judge Sean, tell us a little bit about the culture there and in Spain. Maybe explain to us a little bit about the religious culture there. Even in Spain itself and the religious culture. You've already spoke some about the Muslims, but tell us a little bit about the culture and maybe even the government and the economy. Just kind of what are you guys going to be living in?
Yeah. So Spain it's really politics. Don't talk about it ever. Don't, if you go there, you visit. Don't ask about it. Don't talk about it. They will meet. And you don't ask them where if they were the two things we talk about. What do you think politically? And of course, we talk about the weather, maybe some football, but and then where do you work? Don't talk about that either. Like, that's not. Why would you want to know that about me? You're a creepy person, right? But they'll. But so they're very. It's different. But as far as religion, most Spaniards claim to be Catholic, but most Spaniards claim to not believe in God. So that doesn't, like, there's a lot of overlap there. So it's very common to find people our age, around our age, who are Catholic when they hit the checkbox. But if you ask them the question, "Do you believe in God?" they also answer, "No, don't believe in God." And so it's a very post-Christian world. Um, they're very they're just they're different people. I'm gonna fit in well because I'm a pretty loud person. And they're pretty loud people in Spain.
So are there evangelical Christian churches that are
There are.
originally already from Spain?
There are. They're just very few.
Very few.
Very few. Less than 2% of the country. So, yeah.
And is the country, the government, are they opposed to Christianity? Are they supportive of Christianity? Or they don't care about Christianity?
Well, I mean, they do make the churches register, so that is interesting. Like when we go, we'll go under a visa with the, and we have to go as a religious visa. You have to be sponsored by a state registered church. So that's kind of a little bit of a hiccup there, but that's how that works. So they have some interest in it, but they don't mess with it. They're not over regulating it or anything.
So there's not a suppression or
no,
constricting
just,
of it.
they're very laid back. Stay out of my way. I'll stay out of yours. So,
any questions on the culture in Spain? What they're living with? Tell us a little bit about the economy there and the way that people live as far as
well,
the economy.
I'll give you a couple of things. A big thing is that unemployment is perennially high in Spain. Not just with immigrants, but Spaniards. The unemployment has at times gone up to even 30%, and it doesn't really get too far below 20% unemployment. And that is insane. Like, we would lose our minds if we got even close to 20%. And theirs never goes too far below it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, at the best, they get down to 16, 17%. They're having a great year. I mean, it's just fantastic. So I mean, that's a pretty rough system to walk into. But then you look at they do have things, and this is one of the big draws for people to move there. They have guaranteed medicine. The state provides medicine for everybody, and then they have a good school system, or a pretty good school system. So third world, especially third world countries, are moving there for that as well. And trying to think if there's any other major thing.
They are socialism there. Then it's just socialism pretty much.
Yeah, it is. And we don't want to get too into the weeds of the politics behind it, but it's definitely different situation. One thing I should mention is that she talked about rent. Like, rent is so high. Most Spaniards make about 1,000 euros a month. Most apartments cost 1,000 euros a month or more. So basically, everybody has to go to work, and everybody has to share a space, whether it's with a spouse or with roommates, because one person's going to have to pay for the rent and the other person pays for everything else, or they split it. But basic idea is it's not, you can't live on your own. It's not sustainable the way that they live. So,
Any questions on that here or online? The culture. All right. So I think I've already asked this question. Unless you want to comment further on it, what does religion look like in Spain? Anything further to add to that, or? All right.
We're good.
All right. We already answered it. All right. So is there already a ministry structure established in Spain? So you guys are going over there. Kind of tell us a little bit about what you're plugging into, maybe.
Yeah. So one of the best things about the center is the full-time people there are through the Hannah Project. They are Free Will Baptist, but the majority of we actually have a board that operates the center. It's from multiple denominations. This is just about Christians.
Same place,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Well, and I think it's really biblical. Is however Paul says, I've become all things to all people, and he wasn't meaning that you just throw out the scriptural truth. What he was meaning is what the needs are for Jewish people versus the needs for Greek people. I make myself different for those purposes, so that we can get to the truth.
Exactly.
And so that's what we're doing. Is we're coming at it from a different angle, but for the purpose of the truth. And you're not doing missions unless you're meeting spiritual needs, not just the physical needs. Anything else to add to that?
That's it.
Goals? Okay.
Taking the gospel to a people group that don't have the gospel at all is really quite mind-boggling. And when you think, no matter how anyone was raised, someone who doesn't know the gospel. I think you mentioned today that for the very first time got to hear the gospel. When you think about that, it's really quite astounding to those people are literally going to go and die and go to hell and never hear about Jesus. So that's a staggering thought. So, no questions? All right, Jenny already asked the next question, and that was how has COVID affected?
Twileen has a question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So there are different sects of Muslims. I guess my question is, did you have to go to school? Did you study all the different faiths to learn what each one believes, and how will you handle that? And then there's also the fear that's instilled in them that if they leave that faith, that their families are going to kill them or whatever. How do you deal with that?
So my degree is in missions and in intercultural studies, and I had to take world religions, and I also took some other classes that specifically were geared towards reaching people that were from Muslim background. I did not know this was where I was going to be when I was in college, but the Lord did, and He just put those classes in my path. I had to take them, and some of them were even electives, but God was still just preparing me for that. But one really cool thing is, I mentioned I was home for a year at a community college, and I actually got to take a world religions class at a secular university, and I got to be in class with people who were Hindu, who were Muslim, who were Jewish, who were atheists, and I got to hear their perspective and hear where they were coming from. And it helps me understand a lot more of what they believe and why they believe it. And then the book that he mentioned, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, really it's his biography about how he came to faith, but it also gives so much good information on the Muslim faith and on reaching those who are Muslim. So I really recommend that. But those are things we know, and we try to be culturally sensitive to those things. With the different sects of them. But at the same time, the one thing we try to remember is the verse that talks about, God has not given us a spirit of fear, and but of a sound mind. And so we really are trusting Him. And like I said, where we are is pretty safe, but for them, it is life changing. And They are going to lose everything when they come to faith. They're going to lose their family. They're going to lose their status. They could lose their job. They could lose, everything. And so, really, our goal is to walk through that with them and to say, yes, you're going to give this up, but look at this. This is so much better. It's hard to see them, and it may be crying with them. It will be lots of prayers with them, but we want to walk through that journey with them and help them find that hope and healing through Jesus Christ. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure. Okay.
I was also going to say that as far as the different sects, because they're from the same countries, most of those countries are pretty homogenous what sects they are. And I can't remember which one is the biggest one in Morocco. Yeah. I believe I think they're Sunni, but I'm speaking out of turn because I can't remember. Yeah, don't do that. It'll be okay. We'll think of it later, and we'll feel really really silly.
Do you have something?
We have a question online. Which gender is easier to speak about God with on the Muslim part?
So it would probably definitely, I would say, the women. It's a lot easier to be able to be open with them and to talk with them and to build relationships with them, because they're the ones that it's their responsibility to go and provide food for their families, and they're responsible for taking care of the children, and so they're just more open in general. For talking to the men, there's like a hierarchy, and you really do have to earn their respect and earn that seat to be able to talk. So it takes much longer to even befriend a Muslim man, and so you have to do that before you can even get to a place of sharing. So I think the women are probably you're going to have more opportunities to share, although I would have to say the opportunities we've seen recently have been mainly from Muslim men, so that's a huge praise item and a huge blessing.
Yeah, the big thing that with the men is, and I shared, I think the way I shared it at lunch is, you have two obstacles for specifically for me and for a couple of the other guys at the center. Is you got the age obstacle and you got the outsider obstacle. How do you get to the table? You got to be invite you in. So we're trying, we've got to build a relationship so they'll say, hey, come eat with us, come talk with us. That tea room is a big thing in their culture. That's where they'll gather and they'll talk about philosophical things and they'll think through things together. And so that's a big deal. But when you get there, you can't just start rattling off of the mouth at the very beginning. I'm in my 20s. You wait. You got to wait, and you've got to earn the right for them to go, so what do you think about that? Before you can even, because the minute you start speaking, they turn you off. But when they ask you, what do you think? Then you have you can say what you need to say then, and you still need to be sensitive, but you've been invited, and that is pretty distinct to the men. The women are a lot quicker to. Number one, because you have more interactions with them. Like she said, it is the woman's job to make sure that there's food. The man's job is to bring prestige and honor to the family. And so the women are most of the families, the women come to get the food. It's a great question.
Yeah, good questions, guys. So we kind of covered the COVID thing in Spain, and so let's just jump down to. So Josh, what would you and Bethany, what would you say was your biggest challenges you're facing right now? What do you think you're up against?
Monthly support. This is something that we're really pushing right now because our teammates are struggling today because the first time they went, they didn't raise enough support monthly. They got enough cash offerings, but they came back and they had to continue to raise. And next time we come back, we'll only have 6 months. And so if we takes us a year and a half to raise for 2 years, or a year to raise for 2 years, it's going to take, and we're expected to do 4 years and 6 months. We've got to already have a base. We've got to already have people who are continuing to support us and say, as long as you're on the field, we'll be your partner. And we'll try to honor that because we're partners, not just, donors, and we're not just a project that you're donating to and we never think about you. We want you guys to also be praying for the people. We want to hear from you. We want to get emails of encouragement and say, hey, I'm praying for you, and we want to pray for your church. We hope that all the churches that we go to, we hope to see more people in them the next time we come back, especially hopefully COVID will not be a thing by then. But we want to see the growth and progress. So we want to pray for you too. This is a true partnership in the gospel. If you look in Philippians, read the book of Philippians this week. It is a missionary newsletter from Paul to the Philippian church. Chapter 4, he's making the big ask, please continue to give to me, is what he's saying. But in chapter 1, he shares a little bit about where he is in his ministry. Chapter 2, he's actually sharing about Timothy and Epaphroditus are coming your way. This is another update from the mission field, right? And then, but when he gets to chapter 4 and he makes the ask, he says that, I'm not asking for need because I have this great need. I can be content no matter how the circumstances I'm in, how that lays out. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, he says. But then he says, I'm not doing it for the gift, for myself. I'm doing it so that fruit may be added to your account. Not just fruit as, you got good check marks, but souls. That's people saved and lives transformed and changed. And so we really view ourselves as an extension of your church, of your local community, going to the mission field. And so when we serve someone a cup of cold water, Sand Hill's done it. When we share the gospel for the first time, whether they receive it or not, your church did it. And when someone comes to Christ, your church did it because you supported us. And that's what we really need people to support us. Come behind us, pray for us, give to us, and encourage us.
Any comments or questions on that? All right. And I think the last question we had, I think it's kind of the same thing. What is your greatest need right now? So financially, that's really where we're at. Is you guys are just you guys have got to place things in place and just kind of need the people to send you to make it happen. Is that about where we're at?
Yeah. How shall they go unless they be sent?
So to all of those of you listening at home and all of us that are here, if the Lord lays it on the heart, Josh already explained to you how you can support them. If you have questions about that, we can certainly get the information to the.
Oh man.
So Josh already got that up there for it, and so we hope we've laid it out. If there's not any questions online or here, we hope we've kind of explained it and you guys understand what they're doing. I think it's a phenomenal thing.
Beautiful and wonderful because she's on a fixed income, and we know that that's a sacrifice, but she cares enough about the gospel to do it. It means a lot to us.
And we want you to be connected with what we're doing too. So please sign up for our newsletter. We send that out once a month. We will be getting ready to send out our next one here in the next week or so. So please sign up for that. We also have a Facebook group. It's a closed group. You can't find it, so you have to sign up so that we can find you. You can either do that. We have a book on the table in the back, or you can do that from that QR code. Or you can go to, we have a website too, I can give that to you. But, those are different ways that you can keep up with it. We want you to be invested in that, not just for the financial reasons, but also for praying for us and, really be connected with what God is doing there.
And Josh has already told us, if you think about it, along with the other missionaries that we support, a lot of people have been here and they've went to foreign countries and we may never see them again. But one day, when we're on the other side and someone is there in heaven, and it's because of what these guys did. And if we got to be a part of that, I think that's a pretty great thing. So if any of you are watching at home, you have any questions, maybe concerning their ministry, supporting them, or information about that, you can comment on there or send it through the page, and we will get you the information from them. And if any of you here have that, you can certainly ask them afterwards. So if we have no further questions, you guys are good. Let us.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we've thoroughly enjoyed being with them today. Got to spend the day with them and talk to them, and been a real treat. And their heart is certainly a blessing. And think everybody knows how I feel about young people working for the Lord, so it's we're thankful for them. And I'd like to close out prayer for them, and just hope all of you will take this to heart and allow the Lord to lead you in supporting them, being a help to them. So let us pray for you guys, Josh, you and Bethany, that God will bless your ministry. Father, I thank you for this, Lord, blessed opportunity, Lord. You've blessed us with this young couple, Father, that have really abandoned everything to follow you. And Lord, believing that you're leading them to a ministry that is unique. But Lord, how important, Lord, that there are those that don't know you, don't know the wonderful news that you have died for their sins, Father, that they might spend an eternity with you. And Lord, I pray that you provide the needs, every need, Lord, every financial need, every obstacle that lay ahead. I pray that you would help them to overcome the obstacles and Lord, provide every financial need. And Lord, I pray that they would be able to go and bear great fruit. Lord, see many souls saved. And Lord, when this life is over, may there be many souls in heaven because of the work that they do. Thank you for this opportunity tonight. And Lord, may we just honor you in all that we do, we pray. In Jesus' name, and amen.